So when Serena Williams chose to stop playing tennis, she didn't say that she was retiring. Rather, she said she was evolving, and that the day she chose to evolve was the first day of the rest of her life. The reality today is that the experience of retiring is shifting. For increasing numbers of individuals, the experience of retiring is no longer about working versus not working. Virginia Macali is a longtime friend and colleague of mine. She's a certified retirement coach and guide in the psychology, structure, and soul of the retirement transition. Virginia has a number of interesting perspectives in the area of evolving, or unretiring as she refers to it. And I've asked Virginia to share some of her perspectives, insights, and guiding principles that you may find helpful as you move toward the evolution of your life after you stop working. In addition, you may also know some folks who have gone the retirement route, and rather than experience the happiness and bliss and so on that they expected to experience, they find them more fearful, confused, and challenged by this new approach to retirement. I couldn't think of a better person to speak with about this new phenomenon around retiring or unretiring. So without further ado, let's dive in. So, hi Virginia, it's nice to see you again in person. And before we get into the unretirement area of the interview, I'm curious and wonder if you would share with us some of your background and how you yourself evolved into this area of unretirement coaching.
Yes, Peter, I'm happy to. The first half of my career was in public service. I was a lawyer, I worked in tax policy, and I worked on behalf of everyone in the state and loved that work. I worked with really smart and dedicated people. And when I got into my 40s, I started wanting to work in a different way. There was a culture change in the organization, so many of my friends and colleagues were leaving, but I started getting really curious about how adults grow and change. So that was kind of a driving question for me. So I left that work in the state, and the more and more I talked to people and was inquiring within myself, I wanted to work with people, not just people in general, but people individually, people in a really personal way. So I went back to school. I got a master's degree in counseling that was a step in that direction, but something more interesting happened during that time. I went to a conference and met a woman who introduced herself as a coach. And I never heard the term coaching outside of sports, but that a light bulb went off in me. I got certified to become a coach, and I opened my own business. At the time, I was in a career transition and a relationship transition. So my coaching itself focused on life and work transitions. I was living it, and that's who I helped initially in my career. So fast forward a while, and more conversations over coffee started to include the word retirement, as in, I'm thinking about retirement, or I wonder what retirement will be like, or I'm the age I could retire, should I? So all of those things were bubbling. And I had an opportunity to take a part-time position with our local NPR affiliate, and they had a Next Avenue program, so it was all geared toward people over 50. So I brought in speakers and coordinated workshops on that and volunteer bloggers about life over 50. And then I got another light bulb moment, and I thought, wow, I could add retirement coaching or retirement planning or whatever you want to call it, this next chapter of life, to my transition coaching, because retirement itself is a big transition. So I got certified in retirement coaching, and I've been doing this work ever since.
Thanks so much for sharing your background, Virginia. It's nice to follow the progression your life has been taking over all of these years. A few minutes ago, you mentioned Next Avenue, and I have no idea what Next Avenue is. Can you enlighten us and tell us a little bit about Next Avenue?
Yes, it's a great website, first of all, so you can go to nextavenue.org that provides resources for people over 50 in a number of channels. from work and career to health and wellness to caregiving. And all these articles are written by people who are living in this age or serving people in this time of life. So it's a very dynamic resource and a way to hear other people's stories at this time of life.
Thanks, Virginia. Sounds like a pretty invaluable resource for folks who are at this stage in considering unretirement. So for the longest time, I would define retirement as having chosen the wrong profession. That's just me. So I'm curious about past notions of retirement, which for lots of folks meant I'm going to stop doing something. I'm going to stop working. And my curiosity now around unretirement is that it's not a question of stopping working. It's a question of, as we spoke before, evolving. And so I'm curious about your definition of retirement as it was for our parents and what unretirement is or retirement is now for the current generation.
Well, you're raising a very important point. So, and I think still many people look at retirement as, what am I ending? What am I retiring from? And as we start to look, maybe introduce the question of, what am I retiring to? What am I retiring into? So we're starting to look at it in a different way. Historically, when you had a retirement, it was an event. So there was career life, work life, there was a date, and after that date, there was non-work life. It's very different now as the generation that's retiring now has greater wealth, health, longevity that prior generations didn't have. Of course, it's all, anything can happen at any time, but so I'm speaking of that as a whole. So there are many people that don't feel like retiring at 55 or 65. They want to stay relevant. They want to make a contribution. And retirement, it may involve retiring or leaving or moving on from one career or a lifetime career and moving into something else. It may also look like work. So some people ease out of work. Maybe they're going to work part-time for a while or do some mentoring. They may get into some kind of an entrepreneurial position. So many businesses are being started by people over 50 right now. It's a huge trend. But there are so many ways to do retirement that the word retirement no longer applies. So it may include, I'm going to get more involved with my grandchildren. I'm going to relocate. I'm going to start a nonprofit. I'm going to travel. So there's so many iterations of retirement. And honestly, I'm not sure I like the word retirement because of the connotation that you mentioned, and we're still working with that. It's a little bit of an anachronism.
So in your work, you use the phrase new retirement. So I'm just curious, is that what this is, or is this something different?
I think that's definitely one way to describe it. It's a way to describe what is evolving. It describes new opportunities. It may not be the end of something, but it's a transition into something else. So I think of a couple of examples, and I'll take these from the athletic world. So Serena Williams, tennis legend, she's leaving the profession of tennis, and her quote was, "I'm not retiring, I'm evolving." So she's going into new ventures. She's taking her life in new directions, but she's not buying into the concept of retirement. The second one is Tom Brady. He's the quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He retired, and I think it's 40 days later, he unretired. He went back to work. And his quote was around, "I have unfinished business." So who knows what the details of that are, but he wasn't done. So those are two great examples of the new retirement. They're doing it their way.
So Virginia, another curiosity I have is, in a relationship, when one person believes or thinks they're going to retire and then unretires, I'm curious if that has an impact on the other partner in the relationship, what he or she, how he or she may react to the notion that, gee, you said you were going to retire and I have all these great ideas and now you're not. And I'm wondering if somewhere down the road, sooner or later, that can cause friction or conflict in a relationship. Do you think a spouse wants the other person to retire and not unretire? Is that possible?
Well, you're raising a really important question. None of us live in a vacuum. So if we are in a partnership, we are in a family, we are in a marriage, big changes like that affect each other. And often, it's great for a retirement coach to work with both parties, clarify things, see if the vision is the same, see what they want to do, and see where there might be conflicts. I will piggyback on that too to say that if you Google the Great Divorce, so that is also a trend of increasing number of divorces for people over 50. And I can't really speculate much about that, but kind of a phenomenon right now.
Yeah, so it's a sense of freedom, a sense of difference, a sense of new happenings for one person, which may trigger some type of negative reactivity in the spouse or partner. Old retirement or new retirement or unretirement, I would guess there's conflict in relationships if and when both parties are not in sync with one another in terms of how they choose to move forward. Are they moving forward together in this new unretirement? Are they moving forward separately in this new retirement? It's probably a good idea to consider some kind of professional support if in fact there's a conflict. So that leads me to the question of why is planning so important when it comes to evolving or the new retirement or unretirement?
There were so many guidebooks for us along the way around what to expect when you're expecting, what color is your parachute. So there have been guidebooks for life in transition. But what I'm seeing, there aren't as many resources now for this type of a transition. And why is it important? I just read a book called The Great Age Reboot by Dr. Roizen of the Cleveland Clinic. He makes a pretty strong case for anyone that's close to age 65 now, potentially living well, living in it with health and well-being to about 110. Now, a few years ago, I read The 100-Year Life, and that was kind of a wake-up call for me. And now to think, wow, 110 is a possibility for us. That's quite a bit of time if you're leaving your primary career at age 55, 60, 65. So there's a lot of time there, and that time is really potential. That time is an opportunity to live into really what's important to you now, and to live into really the legacy that you want to leave in the world, in your family, in your community. So that longer timeline and the increase of health and vitality, it's really opens up a different possibility where we can renew into a new career. We can recraft a different life. People have been speaking of it in a different way, not just, quote, retirement, but next chapter, third act. Mary Catherine Bates, and the anthropologist, daughter of Margaret Mead, says these years, 50s, 60s, 70s, she calls it the age of active wisdom. So how do we use the wisdom and experience that we've accumulated in the first half of life, of work, raising a family, getting established, establishing a home? How do we use that?
What do we do at that time? How much relaxing can we do? How much television can we watch? How much hanging out can we do? And the question is, how will I make this time that I have more purposeful, more meaningful?
That's a good question, and I think some of the younger generations are more focused on, purpose and satisfaction, work-life balance than maybe some of the original baby boomers were. But yeah, how do you go about starting to think about this? How do you start, planning? And I think like particular people that come to like a full stop, cold turkey retirement. Retirement can be quite a shock. So I really like to recommend that people start thinking about it a few years at least before retirement. Start putting yourself on airplane mode. Maybe that's once a month or once a week to kind of unplug and reflect, do some research, or have some conversations with people who you admire who are living in the next chapter of their life in a good way. I like to always give the assignment of keep track of what lights up your curiosity.
Yeah.
It may be something that you hear on the radio or see as you're scrolling through your phone or overhearing a conversation. What are you curious about?
So, Virginia, can you give me an example or two or three of folks that you know who have gone through this unretirement stage in their life?
An attorney who started a school, and like 100% of those graduates from that high school are going to college. So that was a passion project of his. Another person that I'm thinking of, she had a life of service in the Peace Corps and VISTA and nonprofit organization. And as she retired, she sold her house in a large city and moved to a resort community her summer resort community where she had family, and she built a house there. So one aspect of her post-career life was social. Her friends, her network was very important to her. So there weren't really that many people that she was able to get to know, or because it was such a small community. And she invites friends of hers that she met through Peace Corps all over the world to come and visit her for a week or two. And it's very satisfying to her to be with friends, to talk, to really have quality time with them.
So what do you have to say to folks or how do you work with folks who are really scared with respect to, on the one hand, this great opportunity, and on the other hand, this fear of the unknown?
Yes, fear of the unknown is really presence, force in the room. So it's really important to acknowledge that we are dealing with the unknown. There is transition, there is change. So there's leaving behind the known and going into what William Bridges called the neutral zone. I think Bruce Feiler calls the messy middle. Like you really don't know, And how can you allow the not knowing for a while? And that's where we start to kind of follow some breadcrumbs, whether it's the curiosity list, maybe it's something that a path not taken, they were really interested in as a kid, or thought, oh gosh, maybe some other time in my life I'll pursue this. So we start to look at some of those little things. And I like to, so that's a lot of exploration, I guess. So I'd say exploration would be like that category. But I also invite them into experimenting, just doing some low-risk experiments. Try something out, play with it. I consider this time of life like you're not getting graded, but it's more like when you used to take courses in college on pass-fail. So, if you think, I'm going to think of an example. A woman in one of my workshops on women in retirement, when we were going through the curiosity list, she said, well, I came to one of your prior workshops, and what came up with for me was, I'm really curious about turtles. And that really kind of surprised her, like where that came from. But like in the following, I don't know if it was a year or two later, she did end up traveling to Galapagos to see turtles. You just never know how things are going to play out.
So then, Virginia, I'm curious, what do you do as a coach at 9 o'clock Monday morning with folks who come to you or tug on your sleeve with respect to their being interested in moving into this state or stage of unretirement or new beginnings and unfolding? How might you work with them?
I mean, number one, I'm a thinking partner.
What is that?
What is that? I engage in conversation with someone to help them think about what this means to them, what it could mean. I provide resources things that they may not have come across, and really kind of set up a process to move through strategic programs. So first we kind of assess, where are you? What's your knowledge about retirement? What are your thoughts and feelings about it? That's kind of step one. Or what are your values? What are your priorities? So it's similar to things that people have probably done through leadership development programs or at work. But it's looking at yourself from a whole different vantage point of how you might want to take things forward. And then I really invite people in to explore and experiment, try some low risk experiments. And then from that, like, things start to become clear, or here's a direction I want to take with, I'd like to do some volunteering for the furniture bank. So you might start with something small like that. A friend of mine starting a business. I wonder if I could help them out. Or what can I do in the schools? So there starts to be seeds. And from that, we can put together what I call a flexible plan. It's not in concrete, but sometimes we just start to look at, well, if I'm still working and I'm anticipating retirement, how can I think of the first phase of retirement? So it's a starting point.
Yeah, baby steps.
Baby steps.
So as time draws to a close, are there any other thoughts, any other pieces of advice, anything that you might want to say to those who are listening, watching?
Well, I would just like to kind of reflect on the question that you just asked. So yes, there are these opportunities, and there can often be fear along with that. And retirement as a transition, there was a study done years ago, and retirement is like number 10 on this life event stressful list.
Mm-hmm.
There is a dark side of retirement, and that can be depression, it can be anxiety, it can be loneliness. So those are also reasons to, start to think about how you can build a meaningful and satisfying life going forward.
Do you think that most of those folks should really work with someone and not do it on their own?
Well, that is exactly what we're hearing from people who have been surveyed, that people that do get into some trouble, either they didn't plan any retirement and they're into retirement a few years and they think, wait, this is what I expected, and they didn't plan for it, and they may get a little lost, and that's okay, and that's a good time to redirect, reinvent, reflect. But any conversations that you can have with a retirement coach or someone that's a trusted advisor that can look at the full scale, not just the financial aspects, but I call them the soul aspects. What's meaningful, satisfying, fulfilling, and purposeful. That will go a long way to ease the anxiety and to forge something new.
Yeah, you sound like such a good resource. You sound like such a light in the darkness that can accompany unretirement or moving into a second life. So if people want to know more about you and about your work, how can they contact you?
Yes, my website is virginiamacali.com, and they can contact me through the website.
Okay. That was great, Virginia. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts and your wisdom. It's a topic that's really timely for more and more folks as we move forward in this new age of retirement.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Peter. I've really enjoyed the conversation and hope this reaches a lot of people. Thank you.
Thanks again, and take good care.
You too.